Shalom. This video will try and deal with the question of problematic verses and stories that occur in the Torah. Oftentimes I get questions of, if God wrote this book, then why are there sometimes things that are so impossible to understand, like laws to kill lots of people or kill a stubborn, rebellious child, or lots of different laws that seem problematic today. Well, there are many responses to this. The first one is that Orthodox Jews have a harder time explaining this because they believe every word is written from God to Moses at Sinai. So they have to rely completely on the rabbinic understanding of these texts. And to some extent, I have that same answer, that we are not Jews that go literally by the words of the Torah. Judaism is a religion that is based on how the rabbis understood the words of the Torah and how subsequent generations have. And so we don't understand the text literally. You need the context, and the rabbinic understanding is the way that that's provided, going back way to the beginning of our earliest understandings of the meaning of the verse. We believe that there's an oral tradition that accompanied this text. A lot of it is codified in the Mishnah and Gemara, and I have a video on that. But for example, what does it mean to remember the Sabbath or to guard the Sabbath? What does it mean to give the corner of the field to the poor? When the Torah says to kill a stubborn and rebellious child, well, how do you define stubborn and rebellious? Well, the rabbis in the Talmud said the Torah said that, but the actual existence of a stubborn and rebellious child has never happened and never will. So one way to understand it is the way the Orthodox do, is to say you have to look at it the way the rabbis did. For example, people often will say, well, it's an eye for an eye. Well, the rabbis did not mean that the Torah is saying you take somebody's eye if they take your eye, but the whole context is of economic compensation, which is the whole basis of our toward compensation system today. So that's answer number one. You have to understand it the way from an oral tradition. Only the Karaites in Jewish history from the 7th to 10th century believed that there was no oral tradition, and the Sadducees before them. Otherwise, the Torah is how it's understood, and those verses then are explained by our sages to not mean what they mean. For example, the Torah has many crimes which are punishable by death. But the rabbis in the Talmud, when they actually wrote the laws of how you apply it, made it virtually impossible to execute anyone. Second of all, for us non-Orthodox Jews, we don't believe it was written every word from Moses to God to Moses at Sinai. It was written over hundreds of years by many people, and therefore, of course, there are going to be in an ancient text ideas and laws that we find repugnant today, a few commands we just don't understand. That necessarily would occur. So what we do is we look at how Judaism understood those, perhaps that they were later put in by someone else, or that they were understood by our sages to mean something else, or we simply say that was a period of history which introduced some ideas that Judaism did not pass forward. That doesn't diminish in any way the sanctity of the text, and we believe that it was divinely inspired. But as one of the great thinkers of Judaism said, the Torah is not a tape recording of God. It is a midrash, a human reflection of God's desires for humanity. And of course, in that, certain ideas are going to come through which we find repugnant today, and we dismiss those. And that's the way in which most modern Jews understand the text. But it's still, just like the Constitution of the United States had slavery originally. That doesn't diminish the power and significance of that document, the Constitution. And the Torah is 20 times older, and we believe inspired by God. And so that is one way we deal with these problematic texts. So I have no problem, in a sense, reading selectively, finding those as the vast majority of the Torah, which speaks to us and lifts us up and has shaped Western civilization, and give us the whole basis of the lies of what we understand to be good civilization today, and reject those commandments, usually of an ethical nature, which seem to be problematic. Now, there are also hundreds of commandments which don't apply at all today because the temple was destroyed, doesn't exist, and many of them had to do with the ancient temple, or some of them have to do with only those people who live in Israel. When you cut away those commandments, you're left with the core of still hundreds of commandments that shape our lives to provide a sense of holiness and awe and grandeur, to make God's vision of a holy world much more possible.